He follows our lives pretty closely. Mark Patinkin is here tonight to reflect on things going on.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
He really needs no introduction, but I shall in just a moment. Good evening. Nice to have you aboard. Thanks so much for tuning in to my State of Mind. I have a funny story from the other day on the radio. So I was talking about Donald Trump, and for those of you who watch or listen to the show on WPRO weekdays 3 to 6 on any kind of regular basis, you may know that I'm, not too bullish on the president, right? So I'm talking about the president in some way, shape, or form, and I'm puzzled about different views. It probably was some of the NFL thing. And I said, it's amazing the way two smart people can look at one thing and see it so differently. For instance, Patinkin today on the Providence Journal. It's a must-read whenever. I don't know if it's every day or 3 days a week. I'll ask him how often. It seems like it's every day, but he's got a significant impact on all of us, I think, who read newspapers, right? And I don't agree with him all the time, but I think his sensibilities are pretty smart. And I can't believe that he watched this Puerto Rican briefing with the hurricane and saw it so differently than I did, that it was so well articulated and executed by the president, and the right kind of rallying cry and the right. So emails are coming in to me, and people are ringing the phones, more or less calling me a dumb for having missed. I read his column on the fly and didn't see the italicized beginning of it. Here's the headline. And it's a reflection on real news and all that kind of thing. The funny part is that the whole damn column was satirical, and I had missed the boat, and it was just a funny moment. And so I'm sure you love hearing about how people read you and see. I mean, and you're very good actually at feeding back the feedback. It's kind of a continuous conversation you're having with your readership.
Given the state of newspapers, I don't care if they read me or misread me, as long as they're doing something that accounts for noticing me. So
it's good to have you.
Good to be
we
here,
haven't
Dan.
seen each other in a long time, but I feel like I feel like you're one of those guys, rare, I think, in media, where I think people still feel like they've got a relationship with you because you share so much. In between your reflections on your boys and your messy house and your parents, we've kind of gone through a lot of what is the great, the bad, and the heartbreaking.
I think another columnist called it living out loud, but to me, as I've told my children, I just had you for material. It's all about material. So that's how I look upon the world. If I could get 70 lines out of this TV show,
right,
that's why I came.
Well,
there,
good. Geez, hope you do. But
it's that is my style as a columnist. That early on, there's most columnists are better than me. They take their own approach. I just felt that my approach should be to be who I am, to put that out there, to speak as the person I am, and to mix it up. One day it could be about Trump in Puerto Rico, satirically.
Oh my God!
And another day about my kids driving me crazy. You weren't the only one. There were some. Just so the viewers know, do you have the column here? Just so I kind of get a flavor.
I do. Yes, I do.
Of what it was saying. So
yeah.
if I may take the liberty, the way I wrote it was basically, and this is how I've been feeling with Trump beating us up, calling us enemies of the people.
Right.
Fake news. So I wrote a column where I began saying, to show that not all news is fake, today I cover President Trump's Puerto Rico visit the way he says we should. And I wrote it like this way. I said, in a well-earned victory lap, President Donald Trump swept into Puerto Rico on Tuesday to celebrate the administration's extraordinary response to Hurricane Maria, and on like there. And the point is, I'm sure Trump would read this and be very happy with it, without seeing any of the irony.
Right.
Of
if you'd taken away the first line, and for some reason, the way I must have read it on my phone, maybe the format didn't show up or whatever, because I'm still fumbling all the time with digital
Well, you know, a
platforms
cursory
in
glance,
newspaper.
you could always you get the wrong impression. But I mean, there's some seriousness to this, and that's it. You know, he completely misses our role, the media's role as watchdogs who are there to hold power to account, and instead would just want us to be this kind of cheerleader. But it was kind of fun writing it
Well,
that
what
way.
inspired you? Obviously, it's important for us to talk about media, and since he's made some comments even in the last news cycle about licensing and the press.
Saw that.
And somebody ought to be watching what the press is doing, and we'll talk about that in a second. But your take on Puerto Rico, now that I get it, I'm guessing is not dissimilar to mine. I could not believe that other than a quick 5-minute hello orientation and let's go to work, that there was this self-aggrandizing ceremonial. Everybody who's nice to me will have a moment to say something, excluding the San Juan mayor, who has not had nice things to say about me and who will sit there unannounced, unintroduced.
Yeah.
And the physical discomfort you can see with American military who are being called up to make some kind of speech that is so antithetical, I think, to how they work, which is let's go. Let's roll our sleeves up and let's go. And he just seems to go on about this stuff as if everybody buys it.
I know, he does. I mean, he was high-fiving people about the low death count. I mean, literally,
hey,
he was spiking
what is
the
it,
football.
16?
Like, literally, it was like spiking the football. I mean, it's one thing to have said it somberly, but it was like, yeah, baby, look at this death count. It was, I mean, it was just, I thought it was an odd performance.
You've had some interesting, your political reflections are not necessarily what you've been known for over the long course of the couple of decades that I've been reading you, but it's been more and more. I think you've been more issue oriented with your column lately than not.
Yeah,
am
things
I
may come
hearing
no,
that?
I think
reading
you're right.
that correct?
I think maybe it just comes with stage and age and all that. I just never know what phase I'll be in, but this seems to be where I've been drawn lately. But and maybe it is the Trump thing. And you know what's been fascinating for me in writing about the Trump situation is as much as we're sitting here talking about my satirical take and how we're appalled at his performance there, I have tried to write about Trump from both sides. I'm not a great Trump fan, but I don't want to be the knee-jerk cliche member of the media who every single time I weigh in says, my God, can you believe this guy? And I think his mere election really is a call to all of us who didn't see it coming, all of those that felt we, on the more liberal side, were the holders of truth, to realize we're missing something in this country. And I know you do that a lot on your radio show. I've heard you many times say, I'd like to get a hold of more Trump supporters because it is our role, our media's role, and I think it is too, the satire side, to try to understand what brought Trump to power, because there's something going on in this country.
Well, it's interesting you say that because the Trump supporters on the radio side have waned. When it comes to when Trump is the conversation, the lines have slowed because people are exhausted and or unable to defend as much. But talking to the base, if you will, or the support system that got him elected, is really important. What I find is that it's kind of difficult to separate him from what they're feeling. They've latched on to him, and everything they're processing is processed through him. And I don't know when that's going to end.
Well, it hasn't yet.
No.
No, I mean, he's I think I read a statistic, he's still got 99% of the base, 99% of those that voted for him.
Right.
But, you know, it's been...
Why do you think that is?
I just think that people want to change, you know, and you can't... And they wanted things shaken up, and maybe you could pick apart how he's doing it and whether it'll even benefit those who want him to shake it up. But people wanted change and someone to shake it up, and you have to give credit to him for seeing that. He heard something out there. You know, like him or hate him, think he's a buffoon or not, he heard something out there, played to it, and won. And the Democrats didn't. I mean, talk about no change. Hillary Clinton, you know, that was their nominee, and they went right into a buzzsaw of a moment in history where Americans wanted change, and they gave them the opposite. And like Trump or dislike him as well. I mean, I could give you a quiz right now. if I were to ask you what Trump stands for, I'll bet you could list 5 or 6, 7 things pretty easily. You know, you could list the wall, and you could list bringing factories home, and you know, and immigration security. Name 5 or 6 things the Democrats stand for. I'm not sure I can. I'm not sure I can.
No, I think that is true. I think that there's a vacuum that he's filling. But my answer to your question would be, I don't think he stands for anything. I think he's picked some items that were saleable to the marketplace of frustration, and I've asked people to keep an accounting of that which he has promised and that which he has delivered, and that which he's actually, you know, and what do they project he actually believes in, and I doubt any of it.
He may not. Maybe it's all kind of some either gut level or strategic level thinking about what will connect and what will get the crowds to the next rally. Maybe, but he still figured out a laundry list of things to put on the radar that has gotten his base really happy.
When we come back, we'll talk about a couple more of those things, but it's not all Trump all the time. See, he sucks the oxygen out of the room all the time. You know, Mark writes about a bunch of different stuff, but we'll hit a couple of different bases when we come back. Stay with us.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired!
I like Bob very much, he's my friend, but he gave me a Super Bowl ring a month ago, right? So he's a good friend of mine, but, and I want him to do what he wants to do, but we have a great country. We have great people representing our country, especially our soldiers, our first responders, and they should be treated with respect.
All right, well, as, you've seen those clips before. 3 weeks ago, 3.5 weeks ago, the president started this conversation on Colin Kaepernick, the not active quarterback right now, formerly the 49ers, and his sit down, kneel down exercise, really out of, you know, a social justice protest. Then he speaks up, and the players decide to kneel and lock arms and do everything they can with the owners to kind of show their unity amongst themselves in response to the president, not really as a...
Yeah, he ginned it up.
Oh, ginned it up. I mean, he just, you know, threw the firecracker in. And even up till yesterday, he's, you know, he's thanking the gods that the NFL executives have now decided to demand that the players stand. Well, no, they haven't. They haven't done that.
They just repeated their policy.
Yeah. So, but you offered, I thought, a very thoughtful evaluation of this whole situation in terms of the actual national anthem thing, your international travel in your past and all of that.
You read that column?
Yes, I read all your columns.
Oh my goodness!
I read all your columns. There was a.
God bless you. I wondered who it was out there. I wondered who our reader was.
It was a good reflection. Share it.
Well, I weighed in on it and said that I at first understood why they knelt, because there was a time I didn't want to stand for the anthem. I'm a 60s guy, and that was an issue back then. We were ambivalent about standing for the national anthem because it represented a war we hated, represented fire hoses down south, and a country that really didn't welcome us long hairs as our home. You know, love it or leave it, that kind of thing. And then over the years, as I became a journalist, having the opportunity to travel to countries that lacked freedom, countries that were full of religious violence, and countries that were full of want, like Africa, it made me realize what America had to offer, ranging from way back then. I mean, you couldn't even, in pre-cell phone days, you'd go through Africa, you couldn't even, phones didn't work, you know? People were hungry. There was want. Went to Northern Ireland, where they've had to build walls between Catholic and Protestant neighborhoods, at least back then when the troubles were there. And it made me realize the achievement of this incredible melting pot of a country, and it changed my mind about it. But then I ended the column saying that even though I would always stand because I now see what America represents, I still respect those that are kneeling today because they are feeling about the country the way I did back then. Now, the interesting twist in that column that may be worth a conversation here is I thought that was so down the middle that it would not be controversial at all. And instead I was slaughtered for it in terms of comment boards and email, and it wasn't from the right. There was a few from the right that said, well, what do you mean you support those that decide to kneel? There was a little bit of that. but most of it was an unexpected onslaught from what I would call the doctrinaire left, who would live it at me as a former 60s guy, who didn't just write a 100% column cheerleading the protest. And I wrote a second column saying that it really opened my eyes to something that's a concern. And this is the other side of the Trump issue. I said it made me realize what it's like to be a Trump supporter, because you stick your head up above the foxhole and say something that the doctrinaire left, the anti-Trump side, I suppose, doesn't agree with, and man, do you get it. And my point was the way they give it to you, the way the doctrinaire left counterattacks. It's different from the right. I get it from the right too when I write anti-Trump columns. They'll get angry. The left, the doctrinaire left, I should say, they get just utterly self-righteous. And it's like, you don't know anything. You're stupid. How could you even think that? And it made me realize that's what we all said about Trump supporters. You know, we who said that the president was guilty of the bigotry of stereotyping of racists and anti-immigrants, we were equally guilty of stereotyping his followers as stupid rednecks. And I saw that because then I got the same slot. You're just a stupid fool because you don't embrace their leftist view of this.
That's a fascinating reflection, and it's an important one to hear, because it reminds us that in this polarized environment, there are poles far apart, and this doctrinaire left that you're talking about, which I'm guessing is doctrine you're talking about, correct? Like they live by a creed and a code.
Yeah, I mean,
they're just
yeah, right. They just see themselves as the harbingers of
they're no help
truth.
either.
And they're as bad as the Trump side, and it made me realize what you just said about how polarized the country is, because there were some from the left that aren't the doctrinaire, the extreme types, that said, well, Mark, I don't agree with that column, because it's not fair to say just because things are bad abroad, we couldn't be better here. That was a fair criticism of that column, and I took it to heart. But most of them just said, you don't know what you're a fool, you're an idiot, you're a moron. They use those words. You're warped. You don't know what you're talking about. And it just made me realize it's not just the Trump side that's shutting down the conversation by being...
Now, where are you hearing this stuff? You hear this stuff in traditional...
emails and comment boards.
Well, we need 10 shows. The comment board stuff, I don't read any electronic commentary anymore, ever. I'll gaze at my Facebook page and see the whacks that I get from time to time. Yeah. The Facebook page we use as a utility rather than a dialogue. Yeah. Because I believe the written word that you pay the mortgage with for such a long time is so valuable, important, and permanent that when I write something, I want it to stick. And this, I don't think sticks. For me, it's my comfort zone. But the keyboard cowardice that exists.
What do you call it?
Keyboard cowardice.
Yeah, I like that. I haven't heard that before. Yeah, they do it. It's
with
troll,
the
classic
message
troll
boards,
thing.
it is so easy.
Yeah.
It is so easy. And I don't think that the press, check that, I don't think that major media platforms, like the Providence Journal, like the New York Times, like the Washington Post, serve the greater good by including them in everything that is written. I think as an attachment to reportorial and editorial and columnist work, I don't think it's healthy.
Yeah, I agree the way it's now managed, because I think it's just it's basically become a forum for negativists, for trolls, if you will.
I don't think
I think if managed better, and I think some venues have managed it better by insisting
your name
on standard, your name, and on no name calling, and we need to manage it better, because I think it drives away the good commenters, because nobody wants to weigh in, because the commenters jump on each other, call each other idiots.
Right. You write something and then they go fight each other. Right. About it. And it's.
I mean, you have to say, as a member of the media, that we have our shot. So of course, there should be a forum, especially in this electronic age where it's possible, for people to have their say. So you always have to allow for that. But man, I don't know why it's not managed better, monitored better.
All right. Some more time with Mark when we come back. Stay with us. Mark Patinkin is with me. Quick hit on the Paw Sox. I want to just touch base on some of your family stuff and lifestyle stuff. What's the buzz on the Paw Sox thing? What do you think?
Well, I wrote a column on it saying that, you know, you still see there's still a very virulent anti-stadium crowd that you know, has continued on from the Providence fiasco. I was one of few voices that was in favor of the Providence Stadium, and man, I sure learned from that. Talk about sticking my head out of the foxhole dumbly. That was a dumb stand by me because it was a bad deal, and I just kind of got caught up in the emotions of wanting to keep the Paw Sox. But I realized how deep this whole post, you know, 38 Studios mentality is in this state, and it still is lingering on here. So I wrote a column recently cautioning the owners that they really, you know, they want to be real careful not to give the impression that they're asking too much from the taxpayer. So I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. I happen to be in favor of the current proposal. I think that would be a huge loss to the state. I think there's about a dozen things that make the state particularly special.
And had we not had the 38 Studios situation, we would not have the same kind of jaded view of the numbers, and those who suggest that we should never have a public-private partnership again would not get the traction.
Yeah, you have to. I think stadiums. I know there's a big conversation about whether stadiums should ever have public participation, but especially in this state, you're not going to get it done without public-private partnership. I do think that there are a few things the owners could have done a little bit better in this. I think taking, you know, having the state, the facility in Pawtucket have to borrow all the money so they could get, you know, and then it's loaned to the owners to put back in the stadium. At a low interest rate. I don't think they needed to do that, but all in all, it's still a deal I would think is worth it.
Well, we'll all continue to follow that. I only have a few minutes. I hope you come back. I mean, a lot, because it's fun to just follow your stuff, and sometimes it's gut wrenching. I have to tell you, from a personal point of view, your recent column about getting together with the family, you know, without mom and dad, lump in throat, half-hour recovery.
I'm at that stage, Dan. You know, that's part of what I've written about. You know, I wrote about when I had kids. Now the stage is, I lost my dad a year ago, and my mom's now in assisted living.
Yeah. Well, we followed it. We followed the whole thing.
Yeah. And that's the stage. And as the column you mentioned was just, you know, we went to this kind of family retreat we've been doing for years, and we thought, oh, we've got this. It's great. You know, we're the uncles and the nephews are young adults now, and we got the groceries, but you know, there was somebody missing in the kitchen there, and every family goes through that, and it's my turn now, and it's a very poignant time of life when your parents are elderly.
Yeah, and when your kids are leaving you.
I can't believe they're doing that to me either.
They're
I keep telling them,
your
don't you want to
kids
move
are
home?
leaving you,
right?
Your parents are gone, or you know, exit stage left. It's
they do come. You know,
it's not an easy world, is it?
No,
it's a great world, but it's not an easy world.
Well, yeah, my kids are young adults now, and they, whenever they do come home, you know, I clear my schedule completely to be able to spend time with them, so that they could blow me off at the last minute and go out with friends and leave me home alone, and that's how I roll.
They don't blow you off every day.
Well, every night.
If you tell them you got a column to write, they'll hang out with you for 10 minutes.
They might, but it's kind of like, why would you want to go out with your friends and women when you could stay home and just talk with Daddy about what family means?
Appreciate your work, man.
Thanks.
All right.
Back at you.
Final word about tomorrow night when we come back. All right, great visit with Mark. Don't forget to read him in the Providence Journal and online at projo.com. Tomorrow night, some political thinkers on all the week's Washington. See you then. Bye.